You know, we usually think of silence as, well, as nothing, right? It's just empty space, a void that we need to fill up with music or a podcast or just anything. But what if silence isn't empty at all? What if it's one of the most powerful, most productive states for our minds? Well, today we're going to explore the psychology of true silence and how it can trigger what you might call a full neural reset.
So, let me just start by asking you this. When was the last time you were in actual genuine silence? And I don't just mean a quiet room. I mean a complete absence of any intentional noise. It's a tough question, isn't it? For most of us, it's surprisingly hard to answer.
And there's a good reason for that. We're basically living in an age of nonstop cognitive loading. I mean, from the second we wake up, we are scrolling, we're listening, we're watching. We've kind of trained ourselves to see silence as this awkward gap that needs to be filled immediately. It's something to be avoided.
But here's the thing. Neuroscience is starting to show us silence is anything but empty. It's actually a vital physiological state. It's an active process that lets our brain repair, reboot, and, get this, even grow. And this whole process is what we're calling a neural reset.
Now, to really understand the power of this reset, we first have to look at the flip side. We've got to understand the damage that constant noise is actually doing to us, the real cognitive cost of living in such a loud world.
So our brains are fundamentally hardwired for survival. They never really shut off their ears, not even when we're asleep, because they're always listening for potential threats. And chronic noise, even low-level stuff like city traffic, it activates the amygdala, which is your brain's emotional command center. Your amygdala hears that constant hum and basically perceives it as a nonstop threat.
And what happens when your brain thinks there's a threat? Well, it hits the emergency switch. This activation of the amygdala triggers a flood of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. So that background noise isn't just a little annoying, it's literally putting your body into a low-grade, chronic state of fight or flight.
And this isn't just some theory. There was a study from Cornell University that looked at children exposed to constant low-level noise, and the results were pretty troubling. Not only did they have higher stress levels, but their brains developed this coping mechanism called auditory gating. They basically learned to build a mental wall to tune everything out, just so they could survive the noise.
Now, the problem with this auditory gating is that the brain isn't exactly a precision tool. It doesn't just tune out the bad noise, it tunes out, well, everything, including really important stuff like speech and learning opportunities. And the bottom line is that all this constant filtering work just exhausts your prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain you need for focus and making good decisions. You end up cognitively depleted.
Okay, so if that's all the damage that noise does, it leads to a really important question. What happens to our brains when we finally just take all that noise away? The answer, it turns out, is pretty incredible.
Which brings us to our next point. And honestly, this might sound a little unbelievable at first. For a long time, scientists just assumed silence was a neutral baseline in their experiments. You know, the boring part. They couldn't have been more wrong. It turns out, silence can literally grow your brain.
This whole discovery came from a 2013 study on mice. Researchers were testing the effects of different sounds, and they used 2 hours of daily silence as their control group. They were expecting absolutely nothing to happen during that time. But what they found was shocking. Those 2 hours of silence triggered something amazing. They triggered what's called neurogenesis, the actual growth of new brain cells, and specifically in the hippocampus. Now, this is a critical part of the brain that's tied to memory, emotion, and our ability to learn. Just think about that for a second. Silence didn't just give the brain a break. It actively repaired it and grew it.
So how is that even possible? How can an absence of something, an absence of input, lead to actual growth? Well, the magic happens when your brain is allowed to switch into a totally different operating system, something called its default mode. This is the default mode network, or DMN for short. It's a specific network of brain regions that just lights up when you stop focusing on the outside world. This is exactly what's happening when you're zoning out or just letting your mind wander. We usually dismiss it, but it's actually one of the most important things your brain does. The best way to think about it is like this. When you're working on something, you're in the task-positive network. Your focus is outward, you are doing stuff. But when you stepped into silence and activate the DMN, your brain turns inward. It's not executing anymore. It's integrating. It's busy consolidating memories, processing emotions, and making sense of all the information you've taken in. This is where those aha moments come from, when your brain finally gets a chance to connect the dots. I absolutely love this analogy from the research because it just perfectly captures why the DMN is so important.
Without it, you can take in information all day long, but you never really process it. Your brain becomes like a library that's packed with books, but there's no card catalog to find anything. The DMN is the librarian that organizes all the shelves for you.
Okay, so the science is super clear. The question now is, how do we actually do this in our noisy modern lives? Let's get practical and talk about how you can start your own neural reset.
And here's the really good news. You do not need to book a session in some fancy sensory deprivation tank. The key isn't adding a complicated new practice to your life. It's all about intentional subtraction, just consciously removing the audio input.
Here are 3 really simple ways you can start. First, try the no-input commute. Just drive or walk in silence. No music, no podcasts. Second, build in a 5-minute gap. When you finish one thing, don't immediately jump to the next. Just sit in silence for 5 minutes. And third, try an audio fast. Dedicate the first 30 minutes of your day to quiet, before all the noise of the world rushes in.
Now, I have to give you a quick warning. This will probably feel uncomfortable at first. Your brain is so used to constant stimulation that it's going to protest a little. But that feeling of boredom or restlessness, that is the feeling of your brain recalibrating. It's a sign that the reset is actually working. You just got to push through it.
It's amazing. The philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote this centuries ago, and it has never been more relevant. He believed that our need to avoid silence is at the root of so many of our anxieties, and now neuroscience is basically proving him right.
So what's the ultimate takeaway from all of this? It's really simple. Silence isn't some luxury or an indulgence. It is a fundamental biological necessity for a focused, healthy, and creative mind. If you want to think better, maybe the very first step is to just stop and listen to nothing at all.